So for this review, I don't actually have a physical copy of the book I'm talking about. I read the ebook version a while back, but I do still need to get an actual paperback for my collection, so I don't have one for reference. But through the magic of cheap Microsoft video editing software, I can make one appear in my hand right now. It's pretty impressive, I know. But in all seriousness, hello fellow travelers, I'm Tim from Secret Fire Books, and this is Mage Leaders, and Hell Followed With Him. I'm not Catholic, I don't even know if I did that right. Back again with another indie book review, and guys, I cannot stress enough, please show some love to your independent publishers and your independent writers. There is a lot of really great stuff going on in the indie scene right now, a lot of great stuff that I've read that people are just sleeping on and haven't gotten enough attention. And I say that not just as someone who is an independent writer and publisher myself, but as someone who has read some really great stuff. So I'm going to post the link for Mage Leader's channel as well as the URL for the Amazon page for his book in the description of this video. So please check it out, show him some love, show all of your indie writers some love, and let's get the video started. In the spirit of June on the Range, the sort of Western-themed reading event that was started up by Michael K. Vaughn here on YouTube. And by the way, welcome back, Michael. If you happen to be watching this for whatever reason, welcome back. Glad you're doing better. Hope to see a lot of great stuff from you in the future. But anyway, in the spirit of June on the Range, I decided to review a Western that I read quite a while back. In fact, this is one of the first, I think it might be the first Western I actually read. I've loved Western movies for a long time, but this was the first time I ever read a Western novel. And it actually happens to be a really great one by an independent author, so that was pretty cool. The weird thing is, you wouldn't really think that this author would be a Western guy. If you don't know who Mage Leader is, I actually didn't know who he was until I read this book, and then checked out his YouTube channel afterwards. But he's a big Battletech guy. His YouTube channel is all about Battletech and tabletop strategy war games and stuff like that. But if you've read this book, you'll know that he is very passionate about this genre, the Western. And it's very well written. It's very good. And it just goes to show you can't really judge someone just by their most well-known interests, I guess. And Hell Followed With Him is the first book in a planned series of novels that take place during the American Old West, right after the time of the American Civil War. They follow a circuit-riding preacher named Elijah Sheffield, who, during his various travels to all the different towns and churches that are in need of pastoral guidance, he also tracks down and turns in various violent criminals and collects their bounties. So he is literally a mild-mannered preacher by day and a gun-toting bounty hunter by night. It's this concept that it was very obviously inspired by Clint Eastwood's character, the preacher from the movie Pale Rider, which that got me interested immediately in this book. But as I actually read it, it got me really hooked, because the way that this character fights criminals and brings them to justice is hilarious. So Sheffield has 4 revolvers. He carries around 4 revolvers, and each one of them has the name of a gospel of the a gospel of the New Testament etched into the barrel. So he has 4 guns: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. This guy is literally shooting down violent criminals with the gospel of Jesus Christ. It is fantastic. I read that concept and I just fell in love with his character immediately. It really got me engaged in the story. And this first book has him visiting this town that he's visited multiple times before. He's preached there multiple times before. He's gotten to know the townspeople there. But since the last time he visited, they've actually come under the rule of this group of bandits that live nearby. The sheriff and all the other authorities are under the thumb of these bandits. And Sheffield finds out that, not only that, the leader of the group of bandits is an old friend of his, an old war buddy of his that he served alongside in the Confederacy during the Civil War. And so now Sheffield has to figure out not only how to free his flock from servitude to these bandits, but if his old war buddy can be redeemed, and if so, if he can solve this problem in a non-violent way. And, spoiler alert, it's a pulpy Western. That's not going to happen. There's going to be lots of gun battles. There's going to be lots of bloodshed. As for the book's other strengths, it does a really good job of balancing the 2 distinct tones of the Western genre. Now, I haven't read that much Western fiction in print, but I have seen quite a few Western movies, so I do know that there are basically 2 broad genres that you can divide all your Westerns into. On one hand, you have what you'd call the white hat Westerns, and these are the sort of older style of Westerns that were popular in the 50s. These are the kind of movies that John Ford and John Wayne were making back then. These were stories where the main character was always a good guy. He was either, a sheriff or a sheriff's deputy or a retired soldier with a heart of gold who would come in and clean up the town. He would sweep out all the bad guys and save the day, make everyone happy. And there were always elements of humor in these stories. And they were very wholesome and very uplifting. And then on the other end, you have, I guess what you would call the black hat westerns. These were the movies that started with the spaghetti western movement of the 60s, Sergio Leone and his Dollars trilogy, as well as all of the other European filmmakers who were making westerns at the time. They made everything a lot more cynical and a lot darker. These were stories where the main characters weren't always good guys. In fact, most of the time they were just straight up anti-heroes. They were bounty hunters or treasure hunters. They were only in it for their own personal gains. They weren't really interested in truth or justice or anything like that. And these movies introduced a real element of grit and violence into the Western genre that wasn't there so much with the older style Westerns. Older Westerns could be violent, but there was a particular focus on the violence and a lot of times in the brutality of human nature in these movies. And so those are basically your two broad categories for Westerns. And sometimes they overlap and cross over. And with Hell Follows With Him, this is very much the case. Mage Leader does a really good job of taking elements from both those different types of Westerns and sprinkling them throughout the narrative. And they do a really good job of blending together. Anytime there is a sad scene, it's uplifted with a happy scene. Anytime something gets a little too saccharine, something really dark happens. The tone is consistent all the way through. Everything blends together really well. And it's a wonderfully paced story. And so there is plenty of action, but there's also plenty of heart to the story. It is a very wholesome story at the end of the day, but there's a lot of violence and brutality that you have to get to that happy ending. So basically, if you're more of a fan of old school John Wayne style Westerns, you will like this book. And if you like the more gritty Clint Eastwood style Westerns, you'll still like this book. The only real problem that I did have with this book was the sort of predictability of the different plot threads. There are a bunch of different tropes at work in this story. Not just tropes from Westerns, but tropes from other stories in general. Stuff that I've seen, 100 times before. And there were multiple times, about 80% of the time, they would introduce a character or a plot thread, and I'd pick it up and be like, okay, I know exactly where this is going to be. And sure enough, by the end of the book, I knew where every character was going to end up. I knew where every plot thread was going to resolve. And I think a more cynical reader might look at that and think it's very cliched and not worth their time. If you're the kind of person who, you need all these big plot revelations, you need all these twists and turns in your story, you need these things to surprise you and, kind of blow your mind every other page, that's not going to happen. You're not going to get this from the story. It's very basic. For all of its creativity, it is a fairly basic story. But I think as long as you don't mind that kind of thing, you'll be just fine. You'll probably love this book regardless. At the end of the day, is it this wholly original landmark title that's going to change the genre forever? No, it doesn't need to be, though. And I think that the original elements it does have really do raise this book above the standard tropes that it uses in other places. I'm still never going to get over, this preacher gunning people down with revolvers that are named after books of the Bible. He's literally preaching the gospel on Sunday, and then he's killing people with the gospel every other day of the week. That is so cool. But obviously, I'm very excited to see where the rest of the series goes. As soon as I finished this book for the first time, I went over to Mage Leader's channel, and I dropped a comment and was like, dude, that book is awesome. I got to know when the next one's coming out. And he said it will be coming out eventually. He's still working on it. It's going to be a while, but we will get another book and then possibly a third and fourth after that. It is possibly going to be an ongoing series. So I'm very excited about that. Very excited to see where Reverend Sheffield ends up, what kind of crazy Western adventures we're going to get into next time with him. If you guys haven't read And Hell Followed With Him, please, by all means, check it out. Give Mage Leader some love. Show him some support. And if you have read the book already, please let me know in the comments what you thought of the book. And until next time, guys, farewell and keep reading.
And check out Sand and Steel, available now on Amazon.com and SecretFireBooks.com. It's short, it's pulpy, and it's bloody as HE double hockey sticks. Reject modernity. Embrace sword and sorcery. Get your copy today.